State we call Jeanne Seckinger.
Raise your right hand. You affirm the testimony you like to give the court in this trial shall be the truth, so help you God. Thank you. Take a seat in the witness stand. State your name again for the record. Spell your last name.
My name is Jeanne Seckinger, Seckinger.
Ms. Seckinger, how you doing today?
I'm good.
Good. Let me fix this Elmo real quick. You understand we're here right now outside the presence of the jury for an in-camera hearing to determine the admissibility of some of your testimony.
I do.
And just very quickly, if you would, give us a little bit. I'm not going to go through all the background that I wouldn't in front of the jury unless Your Honor would like, but give us a little bit about your background and where you currently work, how that led to where you currently work.
Okay. I graduated with a BS in accounting from USC, went to work in an accounting firm for a few years, then switched to industrial at Westinghouse. And in 1999, I came to work at PMPED, which is Peters Murdaugh Parker, as a temporary bookkeeper, and that has grown over the years to the office manager, CFO, accountant, anything business and insurance and HR related.
Okay, and that's for whom?
For Peters Murdaugh Parker, Elstroth and Dietrich.
All right, so that's PMPED,
Correct.
and that's the law firm that Alex Murdaugh used to work for?
Correct.
Does that have a different name now?
We are now a new entity that's called Parker Law Group, LLP.
All right, so just very quickly, you've already kind of said this, but go through sort of the financial side of your job duties as it existed for PMPED back in the relevant time periods.
Okay, so my financial duties are, actually I have people under me that do the day-to-day processing of checks, but my duties are to balance and reconcile accounts, provide financial statements, help with all tax documents, preparation of taxes. Also prepared anything for any government census or surveys that we needed and anything HR related.
I want to ask you a little bit about the financial structure of how PMPED worked, if I could. And if you could explain that a little bit. People often think of lawyers as partners, but are they called partners under the employment agreement that everyone signed?
No, we're called partners when we refer to each other as they're in the business, but for tax purposes, everybody was an owner. It was a C corporation, so everybody's shareholders. And within Peters Murdaugh Parker, every employee was a salaried employee, including the partners.
Okay. And did the employment agreement that everyone signed require that any fees or money generated by any partner or lawyer by the firm had to go to the firm?
It did.
And explain to me how, if you're let's just call them quote partner, if you're a partner, how does the compensation work? What are the elements of compensation as it worked under the PMPED structure back in 2021 and prior?
So every partner received a base salary that they would receive in biweekly payments throughout the year. That was set at a level of about $125,000. The majority of their pay came through an end-of-the-year bonus, which is when we closed out the books and settled on the books. And primarily, after overhead and expenses were met, the net profit was divided amongst those partners. And in a simplified form, it was basically distributed based on a ratio of the fees that they brought in percentage to the total.
Right. But that distribution would not take place until when?
Usually the last week of December.
Yes, sir.
Waters, I was distracted. Can you repeat the previous question for me?
Yes, sir. Going back, Ms. Seckinger, we were talking a little bit about the compensation structure for PMPED as it existed in 2021. And if you could, again, explain to the court how that worked. How are partners, and we're going to call them loosely that term, how are they compensated?
Okay, partners are employed salaries who are paid a biweekly paycheck throughout the year with a base salary of $125,000, and at the end of the year, they received a bonus check, usually in the last week of the year, that divided up the remaining profits of the firm based upon the percentage of revenue each attorney brought into the total.
All right, so when fees came in, they're going to be attributed to a particular lawyer, and ultimately that's going to be a percentage of the total revenues, and that's going to determine their percentage of the compensation at the end of the year after all overhead is paid.
Correct.
Is there also some sort of 7.5% fund or fee or something like, or not, or amount that's put aside?
There is. You would take the gross bonuses or the gross fees everybody brought in, less than overhead, and once we get to that number, everybody would throw in a pot 7.5%, and that money was divided back equally among the employees. And then a new percentage was arrived at to determine how much everybody would receive of the net income.
All right, so you have to take care of overhead, right?
Yes.
And what is an overhead, just generally?
Overhead is just basically the expenses to run the business, what it costs us to advance client costs, what it costs to pay our employees, what it costs to rent the building, to provide equipment, office supplies, postage, et cetera.
All right, and that's got to be accounted for, and then you got to account for this 7.5% as well, correct?
That's right.
All right, and then only after that does each partner get compensation based on their relative contribution during that year.
Correct.
Is typically the vast majority of compensation received by a partner at PMPED received in that distribution at the end of the year?
Yes.
And when does that take place?
The last week of the year, generally speaking.
Okay. And what is the point of that goal? Why do you want to sort of clear out all the money and clear the books?
So basically, that we don't want to leave the money in there to be taxed by the corporation because it's a C Corp entity, so the objective is to get it out to the partners and avoid double taxation.
And so because of that, is it up to each individual partner to essentially manage the bulk of their compensation that's received in one lump sum during the course of the next year?
Yes, they need a budget.
All right, let me show you what's been marked for purposes of this hearing as States 310 and see if you recognize that document.
Yes, this is the employment agreement each shareholder/partner would have signed.
Okay. And I just want to direct your attention to number 2, and if you could tell the court what that provision that's signed by all the partners says.
It says the employee accepts such employment and agrees that the employee will devote the employee's entire time and endeavor to the employer's business.
All right. And then number 3, if you could read that to the court, please.
Services for the benefit of the employer. All professional services rendered by the employer shall be rendered as an employee of the employer, and all proceeds and remuneration received therefore shall inure to the employer's benefit.
Okay. Now tell me what that means.
That means that all fees earned should come through payable to PMPD.
All right. And so if a lawyer earns fees, is it appropriate at all for those fees to go directly to the lawyer as opposed to going through the law firm?
No,
Is that a hard rule to understand?
no,
Anybody ever have a problem with that rule or not understand it?
no,
Pretty easy and hard and fast rule in that firm, correct?
that's right.
If you get the money written straight to you, what is that?
The money's taken straight to you?
Yeah.
That would be stealing it.
Stealing. Please, could y'all turn the screen for me? All right. So. Is that better? So, can you see that, Ms. Seckinger?
Yes,
All right, so 2 and 3 are the provisions you were just referring to?
that's correct.
Tell me just a little bit of your observation. How long have you known Alex Murdaugh? Let me ask you that.
I've known Alex since I was in high school, so roughly 40 years.
And how long have you worked with him, or did you work with him?
About 23, 24 years, since 1999.
And did he have a lucrative practice in your observation?
Yes, he did well.
Was he sometimes getting as much as 7 figures in the end of the year?
He has.
Are you familiar with what's been called the boat case?
Yes.
And tell me what your understanding of the boat case is, just generally. What was that?
Generally speaking, it was an accident that several children got in one evening where it was in Paul's, or the Murdaugh's boat. Paul was accused as the driver, and there were a lot of civil suits and some criminal proceedings going on related to that crime.
And following the boat case, is it your understanding that Paul Murdaugh was charged?
Yes.
Is it your understanding that Alex Murdaugh was civilly sued?
Yes.
And there was ongoing civil litigation at the time Paul and Maggie were murdered?
That's correct.
After the boat case happened, did you and Alec ever have any discussions about structuring fees?
We did. We did in late May of 2021.
Okay.
Right about the end of the month, we had some discussions about Hirschberger. A disbursement came through that he had tried to send his fees to a structured settlement. And the conversation was that he had done it improperly, because to structure fees properly, it has to be part of the release. It has to go straight from the insurance company, straight to the structured annuity place. And we would need to be told about it in our firm so we could account for it in our 7.5%. But in this particular case, Alec had sent the money directly to Forge. We discussed the fact that it would not be any tax benefit to him, and at that point in time he said he was not really worried about the tax benefit of it, and he said he was trying to put some money in Maggie's name due to the boat wreck, and that he was trying to figure out if he was going to structure fees for the future.
Okay. Did he say he was trying to do a favor for anyone too?
He did say he was friends with Michael Gunn, and who is the owner of, or one of the operators of Forge, and that he was going to try to put up to about $250,000 into a structure as a favor for Michael Gunn.
All right, when you say Forge, what are you talking about?
So Forge is a company that does structured annuities.
Do you know the full name real quick?
It's Forge Consulting.
All right, let's call it Forge Consulting.
Okay, Forge
Trying to do that.
Consulting.
All right, tell
Yeah.
me about Forge Consulting and what they are.
They're a company that will do structured annuities for clients. They'll do structured fees for attorneys. They do some wealth management. They do minor pool trust. They have several different things that they do. I think they've branched out into insurance coverage now. They provide a lot of financial tools. Now, when you say that you had a conversation with him about him supposedly structuring fees, how did this come to your attention? It came to my attention over the fact that a disbursement, one of my secretaries, or my assistant, brought to me, that had been brought to her attention by Alex secretary or paralegal Annette Griswold, and came and asked me if this was proper, and then came to me after the fact, and that's when I went and had conversations with Alec about this.
Okay. And so had the money already been paid?
Yes.
And you went to Alec and you asked, what's this about?
Yes.
And he said, I'm doing what?
I'm trying to defer and put money into Maggie's name and structure some fees.
Did he tell you where that money had gone? What was your belief where that money had gone after you talked to Alec?
My belief was it had gone to Forge Consulting.
The real entity, Forge
Yes.
Consulting.
Yes.
All right. I'm going to show you just real quick what's been marked for purposes of this hearing as States 311 and see if you recognize that series. I think there's 4 documents in there.
Yes, these are the Hirschberger settlement documents, which is the case that we're talking about, the fee that he sent as a structure.
Okay. And are there 1 or 2 in there ultimately?
There are ultimately 2. There's one that's structured to look like fee, and then the other one was structured to look like it was client's money that was being sent on the client's behalf.
Which one were you aware of at the time?
I was aware of the fee one for the $83,000 $333.33.
All right. At the time, did you think that any money had been misappropriated or stolen, or did you just think Alec was trying to sort of divert some money because of the boat case, but not necessarily anything misappropriated at that
Right.
time?
We were not thinking about him misappropriating funds or stealing any client funds. What we were concerned about was he was trying to either defer income by leaving it in somebody's trust or either trying to put some money into Maggie's name to avoid things for the boat accident.
And when you say we were concerned, who's concerned?
Myself and some of the partners.
Why are y'all concerned about him potentially trying to put money in a structure or in Maggie's name because of the boat case?
Well, because that would be wrong and we did not want any part of that.
Let me put this up on the screen real quick. All right. Do you recognize this document right here?
Excuse me. Yes, that's the document that is in question with the $83,333.33 fee sent to Forge.
All right. And right there, tell me what this disbursement sheet is very quickly. Explain that to the court.
So this is where the client recovered $250,000. You can see it came from 3 different insurers. And we would take a portion of our fee. Generally, this looks like a third. And our expenses of $9,300. The Sedgwick claims would have been a lien that we were paying off, and then the $140,678.55 would have been the money dispersed between the beneficiaries of that estate.
And what is this line right here?
That would represent the fee.
All right. At this point in time, had you actually seen the check that was made out for those fees?
I don't recall if I actually looked at it at that point in time.
And normally fees, where would they go?
Normally, if fees would come to us and we would deposit into our income account, what we call our income account.
Okay. So fees come in from somebody who pays a settlement, where do they go initially? What account do they go in?
To the income account, the PMPD operating income account.
Okay. Fees go in there?
Yes.
All right. When a settlement comes in, where does it go?
It goes into a client trust account for the benefit of the client,
And then the portion of that is allocated for fees, it goes from the trust account to where?
to the income account.
Okay. It usually doesn't go out to Forge Consulting or anything like
No.
that? All right. After you had that conversation with Alec, at that time, did you follow up any more on the matter?
We had a couple of conversations about it in relation to when we were having some other conversations, but we didn't really readdress this again until late September, late August, early September.
Did you kind of put it on the back burner?
I did. I was, at that point, it had been done, and I was trying to figure out how we were going to account for it on our books, and just kind of had it out there as a reminder to try to put in my mind later to see if anything else had been done like that, or to see if he was going to try to do that again.
After that particular event, you said that was in late May sometime?
You're right.
Did another matter come to your attention about disbursements as it related to Alex Murdaugh's practice in his business?
It did.
And tell me what that was, please.
So this was a case called the Ferris versus Mack truck case. And on a Monday, I believe it was May 24th, Annette Griswold called me and said that she had something she needed to discuss with me. I was out of the office that day in our Waldoboro office, but when I returned, we met. And when she showed me, what had happened was we received a check for our client expenses. So this case was actually dispersed by the associated attorney, which was Chris Wilson. So he sent us a check for the money that we had forwarded as client expenses, but we did not receive a fee check. And that in itself is odd generally.
And why is that odd? Why did Annette call you? Because y'all had received a fee check from Alex's best friend, Chris Wilson, but not the expense check, but not the fee check.
Right. Most of the time we receive them together. Well, Annette, when she did not receive them together, called my assistant Nicole to make sure we had not already received the fee, verified that we had not already received the fee, and at that point, Annette had some conversations with Vicki Lyman in Chris's office. And Vicki informed Chris that their bosses had already got the fee when the settlement was signed, which had happened in March, and this was May.
And Vicki informed Chris or Vicki informed Annette?
Vicki informed Annette of that.
All right. So why is that a concern to you that now you're hearing the fee's already been paid?
Because now we know we don't have the check, we've never received it, so either he's got a fee, either he's got a check he hasn't turned in to us that is properly payable to PMPED, or he's received a check payable to him.
All right. And when you were considering the possibility that he perhaps received a check payable to him, aside from that being stealing, as you had earlier testified to it, what's your concern then?
Saying that he's trying to hide money from the boat wreck.
Money from both. Okay. Correct. All right. Stand by for me. I'm going to show you what's been marked as, for the purposes of this hearing, as Exhibit 312, and see if you recognize this document.
Yes, this is the expense check that we received in the Ferris matter
Okay.
from Wilson Law Group.
Just quick flip through it and just tell me generally what's in that packet.
The rest of the packet is our deposit, which is an internal record, our client cost report, which matches that expense check. Then the rest of it, the second, what I'm looking at right now is a check made payable to Richard Alexander Murdaugh Esquire for $192,000, and it references Ferris fees.
Okay, keep
That's-
going.
Next page is the deposit, where it says Bank of America deposit only, and it looks like ACH. That looks like, it actually looks to me like Alex initials, and then it says Bank of America.
Is there a series of emails after that?
Series of emails starts with Vicki Lyman informing Annette Griswold about the fact that their bosses had received the fee back when the disbursement was signed.
All right, let me put those emails up on the screen. I believe there's no objection versus this hearing. All right. So this is email, and Annette Griswold, explain to the judge who Annette Griswold is, please.
Annette Griswold is one of Alex's primary paralegals.
Okay. And right here, this is an email that was ultimately sent to you as part of bringing this to your attention?
Yes.
All right, and what is she asking right there?
She said, why just expenses and no fee?
All right, and what was the response there?
Dear friend, it is only cost because your boss and mine and Liz's got their fees once they were signed.
Okay. So, and that's informing you that Chris Wilson's office says they already got the fees.
Correct.
All right. All right. After that, did you have a conversation with Annette what to do?
I did. I actually talked with Lee Cope. We went to Lee. Sometimes a lot of the partners are not in the office, and Lee Cope was the one who was in the office. So I went to talk to Lee about what we should do. And of course, Annette was worried about getting, ramifications if she was wrong and didn't want to be in trouble. So Lee and I decided to take it over from there. And the course of action that we decided upon was that I would send an email to Annette requesting the disbursement, the supporting documents, and the general ledger printout from Chris Wilson's office, which is what we keep in our office.
All right. And if we go right here, is that the email you're speaking of right there?
That is
All right. What's the date on that?
May 27th.
All right. And so then what happens to that email from there if we look over to the next page?
So apparently Vicki in Chris Wilson's office was on vacation. So on June 2nd, Annette clarifies with Vicki what exactly we were looking for. And again, she asked for the full disbursement paperwork, including the disbursement sheets, expenses, supporting docs, and ledger.
All right, and you're included on that email?
I am CC'd, yes.
Okay. All right, did y'all ultimately get a response on that?
Vicki responded that she would have to send that email to Chris because she did not have privy to that information. So that was on the 2nd. The next day, Alec came into my office early and asked me why I needed that information and assured me that the money was in Chris Wilson's account and that they could get it anytime.
Okay. And did y'all discuss anything further when you had that conversation?
Just that we needed to get it, or I needed proof that it was there, that it was necessary to get it. At that point, I didn't indicate to him that I thought it was missing. I was just asking for the documentation.
And that was on what day?
It was sometime in between June 2nd and June 7th.
Okay. All right. On June 7th, did the issue come back to a head?
The issue did come back to heads.
Just clear, this is June 7th, 2021.
Yes.
And how much were these fees supposed to be, did you know?
$792,000 in total.
And to this point, the firm had not received those fees, is that correct?
That's correct.
And Chris Wilson's office is saying initially, we already dispersed them.
Yes. And Chris Wilson's not saying anything to me.
Was, to your knowledge, was an inquiry made to Chris Wilson at that time?
Lee Cope, we had not inquired Chris Wilson other than requesting this information at this point in time.
All right. So tell me about June 7th. How does that go?
So on June 7th, I was going to make another run at finding out from Alec if we had their information. I went upstairs to his office is on the 2nd floor, and he was leaning on a file cabinet outside his office. And he turned and looked at me when I came up and said, "What do you need now?" And gave me a very dirty look, not a look that I'd ever received from Alec, from just kind of frustrated with me look, which made me go, "Oh, you want to know? Let's go in your office." So we went in the office and closed the door, and at that point, I told him that I had reason to believe that he had received the funds himself and that I needed proof that he had not.
Received those fees himself?
Yes.
And I needed proof that they were not?
Yes.
What did he tell you?
He told me again that he assured me that the money was there and that he could get it. And at that point, I said, I'm just trying to do my job, and if I don't get this paperwork and verify that with these questions, I'm not doing my job. He actually acted like he respected that, and again said that that money was there, and that he, again, was trying to decide what he was going to be doing with it.
And did y'all get to conclude that conversation, or just something interrupted?
We did not. He took a phone call in the middle of that conversation. That phone call was about his father who was in the hospital, that he was going to be terminal, and that there was nothing else they'd be able to do for his father. So that changed the mood of the conversation. We quit talking about business, and I immediately asked about him and his family and his dad, and we got talking as friends at that point, concern over the family. And after that, I shortly left, so it briefed and cut down the conversation.
All right. You'd come in there asking for proof where that money was, because you had reason to believe he took it, and then the conversation ultimately got short by the call about his father.
Yes.
Did you have a conversation later in the day with Alec?
I did. Around 4 o'clock, my phone rang, and I remember that because I had been under the impression Alec was going to leave and go to the hospital or leave to deal with his father. And around 4 o'clock, my office extension rang, and at that point, he was asking me for some information on his 401k balances because he stated he was working on some financials for the hearing on the boat accident that was later in the week.
There was a hearing later in the week, and he was
Yes.
working on financials for the boat accident.
Correct.
Did that strike you as odd?
That he called and asked me?
Yeah.
No, he had asked me before. So, and I would be the one to give him the 401k. So it didn't surprise me that he's calling to ask me about that. But I was surprised that he was in the building working on it.
And why was that?
I just thought he was leaving a deal with his father.
Because that interrupted the prior conversation.
That's right.
Is that the last conversation you had with him?
It is.
When did you find out about the murders?
I initially found out through the rumor mill around 10:30 or 11 o'clock the evening of them, but I did not get confirmation until I received a text from the partner roughly 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
Were you shocked by that?
Yes,
Scared?
yes,
Worried?
yes.
Worried for Alec?
Worried for everybody, yes, especially Ellie.
In the wake of the murders, do you know if the hearing that was later that week got canceled?
It did get canceled.
That was a hearing in the boat case where he's personally a defendant?
That's my understanding, yes.
In the wake of the boat case, did you and the partners have a discussion about what to do about getting to the bottom of these Ferris fees?
We did. We did not the week of the murders because pretty much our office shut down the week of the murders, and then his father also passing away. But when we got back around to it, Lee and Mark Ball and I were the ones doing the discussion. Lee decided that he would call Chris Wilson himself directly and try to get the information, and Lee took over from there.
In the wake of the murders, did anyone want to bring that up to Alec again?
No, nobody wanted. Alec was distraught and upset and not in the office much, and nobody wanted to harass him about nothing that we thought was really missing. We had several months till the end of the year to clear it up, so we were not going to harass him at that point in time.
So that part just got stopped in its tracks, is that true?
Yes, Lee took over calling Chris Wilson and trying to pursue it.
All right, and when was that? You said in July sometime?
Yes, probably early July.
All right, and what was the result of that?
Lee said, and you could speak to him more clearly, but Lee said Chris Wilson got off the phone pretty quick with him, which was surprising because apparently Chris Wilson has the gift of gab. But again, Chris assured Lee that it was there.
All right. Ultimately, did y'all get an email about this particular issue?
We did. Ultimately, on July 19th, there was an email from Chris to Alec stating that the money was in Chris Wilson's trust and would have been available anytime that we requested it. That email was forwarded to Lee Cope and myself.
From whom?
From Alec.
And what is that the email up on the screen that you're talking about right now?
It is.
All right. And we see $600,000 for Andrew Ferris and $192 for Denise. Explain that breakdown, if you would, please.
So there's two parties in this case, and apparently there was two recoveries, and each of them would have had a fee dependent upon their recovery. So to me, this looks like Andrew's portion, the fee for his settlement was the $600,000, and Denise's was $192,000.
At this point in time, had the firm received this $792,000?
No.
Did this email, though, sort of end the inquiry, at least for the present moment?
Yes.
All right, well, let's move the story forward again. Did this matter ever come to your attention again at a later time?
Yes.
All right, and tell me when that came to your attention.
That would have been in September, after we found some other misappropriations and we had confronted Alec and he had resigned. We ended up having more conversations with Chris Wilson right after that, and Chris admitted that he did not have all the money.
Well, let me back it up. Before we get to there, I'm talking about as far as it relates to Alec. Did this particular issue with trying to get the Ferris fees come to your attention? And let me take you to early September of 2021.
No, not that I recall.
Okay. In early September 2021, did the Hirschberger matter that you mentioned earlier, did that come back to your attention?
That came back to my attention. I started pursuing that and decided I was going to go through and look and make sure that he had not tried to already defer something else that we had missed. And at that point, I decided to print a ledger printout of our system of payments to Forge. And as I did that, I started printing all the documents that would relate to those disbursements, the disbursement statements and the canceled checks. And as I started printing the canceled checks off, I could see Bank of America on the back and Alex Murdaugh's signature. And everyone that came out was just put it a little bit more in the grave for me. That's when I found that out. I had William Barnes come over, who was a partner who was in there in the office that day, and had him look at them. he also believed that they were Alex signatures on the back of these checks.
All right, and just real quick, these are checks coming from the client trust account,
Yes,
and they're made out to what?
Forge.
But what's unusual to you that's causing you to have that feeling that you just described?
The endorsement in the Bank of America on the back, and the fact that it looked like Alex signature.
Okay, all right. And so you talked to William Barnes, is that right?
Yes,
And did you talk to other partners about what you were finding?
we did. William and I then called Mark Ball, who had been aware of this situation the whole time. Mark Ball was the treasurer, so he came back into the office. We showed him the signatures. He agreed with us, and he also recognized one of the disbursements as a case that could not have possibly been dispersed yet because it was held up waiting some court orders for a workers' comp lien. We also talked to Lee Cope that night about it, and we came to the plan for Lee to call Michael Gunn with Forge and see if they had banked at Bank of America. And Michael Gunn confirmed that they had not banked at Bank of America in a number of years.
Did y'all send them a list of clients, the ones that you were pulling off of your system that had payments to Forge at Bank of America?
We did. We gave him a few names that evening, not the complete list. We gave him a few names that we had, and he verified that Michael Gunn verified to Lee Cope that those were not any structures or any annuities, and they didn't have records of them.
All right. Around this time, did Annette bring you anything, and that this is all going on?
Yes, so this is completely independent and coincidental. Annette, the same afternoon of September 2nd, was in his office trying to look for something, and when she moved to file, a check fell out. When the check fell out, she looked down, and it was Chris Wilson, and it was the $225,000 check payable to Richard Alexander Murdaugh that we'd already found.
And I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 313, states for purposes of this hearing. Do you recognize that?
That's the check.
This is the actual check that was found, is that right?
That's correct.
All right, hold on for me real quick. It's got an endorsement on the back. Let me ask you this. You've worked with Alex Murdaugh for how long?
23 years roughly.
During that time, did you become familiar with his handwriting?
Yes,
Can you recognize it when you see it?
yes,
Looking at the handwriting, the endorsement on the back of that document, do you recognize it?
that's his signature in
This is
handwriting.
writing?
What, you have copies of these various exhibits for the court?
Yes, sir. And Your Honor, if you'll just give me 1 second, I'll hand the exhibits we're talking about up to the court as well. But up on the screen, is this the check?
Yes. Yes,
And then on the back, whose writing is that?
Alex.
Once you started printing out all those Forge ones that had Alex writing on it at Bank of America, and you contacted Forge, did you ask them whether or not they ever banked, the real Forge, if they ever banked at Bank of America?
Lee Cope had that conversation, and Michael Gunn verified that they had not banked there in a number of years, more than 10 years.
And they didn't have any active structures on any of the clients that y'all had given them?
That's correct.
As a result of that, what did the leadership at the firm do next?
We convened a meeting on the morning of Friday, September 3rd at Lee Cope's house with the majority of the partners and myself present. We discussed what we had found and showed everybody the documentation that we had recovered. and then the choice was made. Randy was not present initially. The choice was made to bring Randy in and show him what we had found.
And after Randy was brought in and showed what was found, what happened next?
Randy immediately conceded that we needed to talk to Alec, that it looked like he had stolen. And Danny and Randy got together and met with Alec outside of the office.
Okay. And did they confront him with this information?
They did, and it is my understanding that Alec admitted it and that it was determined he would resign.
Okay. Did he ask for a leave of absence to your?
I think he tried to do a few other things before resigning, but we made him resign.
After the decision was made to resign, was it announced right away, or was there any statement put out or anything like that right away?
It was not announced right away because the decision was made. Johnny Parker was getting married the next day, and it was late on a Friday, and that we were going to kind of hold off until the first of the week. We were going to contact some ethics attorneys and see what we needed to do and announce it the first of the week.
So we're in the weekend, September 3rd, September 4th, something like that?
Yes,
Is that Labor Day weekend?
yes.
What's the next thing you recall hearing about Alec?
The next thing I heard about Alec was, I was actually with my family on the sandbar, and the next thing I heard was Suzanne Peoples with the EMS came down and told me that Alec had been shot in the head and was being flown out to Savannah.
Was that on the side of the road at Old Salcahatchee?
That's correct.
What's the first thing you thought when you heard he had been shot?
You know, nobody knew what to think. A lot of thoughts went through, but fear went through. Was this retaliation? Was he involved in something bigger that was going to get more of us in trouble? And just fear.
All right. As the months went on after that, did y'all continue to review your records looking for additional misappropriations?
We did. We immediately decided, once we found this out on September 2nd and had the confrontation on the 3rd, we immediately started doing a dig into our books and proactively going to look for anything. And anything that we found, we turned over to law enforcement. We also had a forensic audit from an outside firm come in and provided information from them. So this took most of September, gathering all this information and going through all of our stuff to figure out what else we had missed or what else had occurred.
You've already described the checks to the Forge account at Bank of America, which was a fake Forge account, is that correct?
That's right.
Was there another manner in which Alex Murdaugh misappropriated money that you uncovered in your review of the firm's records as CFO?
Yes, we've also found out some payments made through Palmetto State Bank.
Okay. And generally explain how those were working.
So those were working on, some of those Russell Lafitte was the conservator on, and funds were directed to Palmetto State Bank as if they were going to be held for the beneficiary. And those checks were later converted into personal use for Alec.
All right.
And incidentally, the week after we of the roadside shooting, when we were going through stuff in Alec's office, we actually found Forge, R. Alexander Murdaugh, doing business at Forge bank statements in his office.
Okay, so you found the Bank of America bank statements?
Yes.
And the title on those bank statements was what?
R. Alexander Murdaugh, doing business as Forge.
Okay. I'm going to get a document marked, if I could, real quick. Do the client trust account checks, what color are they?
Green.
All right. And the operating checks, are they a different color?
Blue.
Your Honor, 314 314 for this hearing. This will be the spreadsheet that's in one of the folders in the packet I just gave you. It starts at the top, the check date 12/26/18. And I'm going to show you what's been marked as stage 314 for this hearing and see if you recognize that document.
Yes, this is a spreadsheet that we've developed of the money and the clients that had money stolen using the forged payment method.
All right. And by the forged payment method, you mean what?
Basically, checks payable to forge that looked like they were going to be for a structured annuity on the behalf of the client.
All right. And again, for the purposes of this hearing, in preparing that chart, you've been keeping a chart, keeping these records. Is that correct?
That's right.
Is this all the misappropriations, or is this focused just on some for purposes of a particular category?
This is just for purposes of this particular category.
And what category is that again?
Forge.
Okay. All right. All right, I'm going to put this up on the screen. And just real quick, if you could just go across and tell me what the various categories represent, please.
Excuse me. The categories, if you see the column with category forged payment, those would be where checks were actually written to forge as if those were the beneficiary's proceeds that were being sent for a structured annuity.
Okay.
The next line where it says Barrett Boulware took insurance proceeds, this is actually a check that was payable to Barrett Boulware from Southern Fidelity Insurance. And Alec actually endorsed that check. He had power of attorney on that file. He actually endorsed that check, and later we were able to trace it into his personal accounts.
All right.
If you keep going down, the majority of these are forged payment. If you get to Dion Martin, the first line says fake.
Just real quick, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Just going across, though, we've got the client, we've got the civil action number, we've got the category that you were just describing, we got the date the trust was funded, and then we have the amount. Is that
That's
correct?
right.
And the date the trust was funded, what does that category refer to?
That refers to when we found out and did the deep dive into exactly what had happened on each file and deposited the money back immediately into our client trust. So that's the firm actually, as we found these, put money in client trust. We then met with all the clients, reestablished what the correct disbursements should have been, and returned all funds to the clients.
So the firm had to pay the money back that you've determined in each one of these cases that Alex Murdaugh misappropriated through the fake forge on this list.
We did.
What's the total amount on this sheet?
$2,841,512.55.
Right. And again, does this represent everything or just a particular category?
Just a particular category.
Just real quick, I see that says 129.11 for Thomas Moore. Is that supposed to be 21?
Yes.
Okay.
And that would be the date and the check number of the check that was taken.
I'm going to hand Exhibit 314 up to you. And if you could correct that with my pen here, and then just put your initials next to it, please. Going back to Exhibit 314, if we look at all the check dates on here, we have the earliest one being about August of 2015, is that correct?
That's right.
And then it continues all the way up to early 2021, is that correct?
That's correct.
spreadsheet that was just marked, have you also prepared some supporting documentation for each one of those transactions of misappropriation that you've identified?
Yes, we have.
And these are from the records and your investigation into the records at the firm?
That's correct.
And each one of these, has the firm had to make the clients whole because of the defendant's misappropriation?
We did.
All right, I'm going to show you what's been marked as 315, and this is a particular case is Elise Mallory. And just as an example, and see if you recognize that document.
Indeed, this first document is the disbursement which would have been drafted at the end of the case that states the recovery, expenses, fees, and payments to clients. Next, we have, this one actually had a payment to forge, so I have a copy of that canceled check. And then the third and fourth pages are where we did our correcting disbursements with footnotes about what had happened and explained everything to our clients when we reimbursed them.
Okay. Let's put that up on the screen real quick. And are there similar documents, supporting documents for each one of these transactions that's on your spreadsheet?
There is.
All right. So this is a disbursement sheet, is that right?
That's correct.
And I didn't ask you, but very quickly, tell me what a disbursement sheet is and how they're supposed to work.
So a disbursement sheet just shows at the conclusion of a case, once the recovery, it will show the recovery amount, list out the fees that were sent to the attorneys, shows fee splits if there's multiple attorneys, shows the amount of expenses we collect back, any liens or loans that were payable that were in the scope of that case, and then the final amount would be the payment to the client or the client's beneficiaries if they had beneficiaries.
All right. And then down here at the bottom of this particular one, do you recognize that signature?
Yes, that's Alex.
Okay. And going to the second page, what is this right here?
That is a copy of the check that was payable to Forge that you saw on the bottom line of that other disbursement, as well as the back of it showing the endorsement.
All right. And is that the real Forge or the fake Forge?
That's the fake Forge.
All right. And then what is this document right here?
This is the correcting disbursement. The yellow totals would signify what the correct amount should have been and the corrections that would needed to have been made.
All right, going back to this first page, in this particular one, how much was the recovery? You see that?
$183,528.
All right, and then was there an attorney fee taken from PMPED?
There was an attorney fee taken. In this case, it was $30,000, which was a reduced fee. We generally get a third or 40%, but there are instances where the attorney will reduce their fee for some reasons.
And do you know why who requested the fees be reduced in this case?
That would be Alec would have done that.
Alec did that, and so but those fees got paid to the firm from that recovery, correct?
They did.
All right, great. So the rest of that money went to the client, didn't it?
It did not. It actually went to the fake Forge count where Alec stole the money from the client.
Every last bit of it.
Every bit, the $152,866.
That client didn't get one dime until y'all had to make it right.
That's right.
And that's similar to the rest of the examples we have.
It's exactly like the rest.
Been going on for years.
Yes.
There is a supporting documentation like that for each one of these, and they're in the packet up there. I'm happy to go through all of those with the witness. I don't want to sell myself short if I need to. I don't know if the point for purposes of your honor is made, or if you would like me to go through each one of those. I'm happy to keep going.
Who's this? Mr. Griffin? Is this yours?
So if you. Okay. Let's indulge just one moment, Your Honor.
everything, Ms. Seckinger?
Ms. Seckinger, yes.
Seckinger is,
I can do that from the spreadsheet, Your Honor. And then we're marking the supporting documentation, which I'll go ahead and mark, but I think with Ms. Seckinger, we can kind of walk through each one and describe each one while we do that. But each packet has, we've got this spreadsheet that has each one on there, and then for each one of them, we tried to minimize it down to the bare minimum. And again, this isn't even all of the misappropriation. But we've just have a few supporting documents for each one, which is the disbursement sheet, the fake forged check typically, and then the corrected disbursement sheet that the firm had to do. That's generally what each packet has, for example, like the one we last did. Is that correct, Ms. Seckinger?
That's correct.
And so I can go through those quickly, and we can do that on the spreadsheet. And then we have one other category that they uncovered of manner in which he was able to misappropriate money going back to, I think, 2008, 2009, something like that.
you may proceed.
Thank you. All right. So, Your Honor, we're going through that packet that was provided up there with you, and we're going to go in order except for Hirschberger, which we already talked about. And so, Ms. Seckinger, can you see okay on that screen there?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I'm going to just kind of move through these as expeditiously but as accurately as we can. First one, we have this particular client, Miss Adriana. Is that correct?
That's right.
All right, and I'm going to put 317 up on the screen, and is this the disbursement sheet for that?
That is the disbursement sheet for that, yes.
All right, and down at the bottom, do you recognize the signature where it says attorney?
That's Alex's signature.
All right, and would typically the attorneys meet with the clients and get them to sign these disbursement sheets before any disbursements were made?
Typically, we did the checks on the attorney's signature, and then the attorney met with the client and had them signed at the same time they distributed and discussed the disbursement.
Gotcha. All right, and then right here on this particular one, we have a total recovery amount of how much?
$247,500.
All right, and then the firm gets paid its fees out of that.
And again, that looks like a reduced fee of $22,000.
And what happens to the rest of the money?
The $225,073.46 went to a fake forge account that was for Alex's benefit.
All right, and is that the check right there?
That is.
Whose signature is that right there?
That's Alex.
All right, and that's 225 and change, and then you have the corrected disbursement sheet, is that correct?
That's correct.
And this is where the firm had to make good on Alex's misappropriation.
That's correct.
All right, let's move to the next one. This would be for Mr. Barrett, using the first name, is that correct?
That's right, Barrett Bolware.
All right, and just using the first name. We have this first one is the 75-193, is that right?
That is the check I discussed earlier that was payable to Barrett that Alec endorsed directly and deposited into his account.
All right, and I'm on exhibit 318. We're going to the third page, but is this that check right here that was made out to Mr. Bolware?
That is, and that was actually found as we went through his desk after September 3rd.
All right, and you recognize that writing right there? I can zoom in if you need to.
That's Alec's writing.
All right, and this is the deposit slip went along with it?
Yes,
And what's the name right there?
Alex Murdaugh.
All right, going to the next one on the list, we have this one, and the amount is $279,850.65, is that right?
That's correct.
All right, and we're still in exhibit 318. And this is the disbursement sheet, the original disbursement sheet right there.
That's correct.
Whose signature is down at the bottom?
That's Alex Murdaugh's.
And what does that say right there?
$279,000, $850.65. They were forged.
Fake forge or real forge?
Fake.
All right, and then what is that right there?
That's the check payable to Forge showing Alex signing it and endorsement on the back.
Okay. All right, let's move on to the next one. We have, this is Hirschberger. We already did that one, correct?
That's correct.
Well, yeah, we already did that one. All right, let's go on, and we did the next two. Those were those two fees that Alec told you he was structuring?
That's right.
All right, or at least this one was, correct?
That's right.
All right, let's go on to Ms. Gary. This is States 319. This is the disbursement sheet right here,
That is the initial disbursement sheet.
okay? And what is that right there?
Excuse me, that is not the initial, that's the second one. So there's a forward structure right there of 112.5, a payment of the personal rep and the amount divvied between the beneficiaries. That forward structure should have been paid to the beneficiaries, and again, it was paid to the fake forge account.
All right,
You
look
see
at-
the check signed by Alec and endorsed by Alec.
all right, so that's 112.5 right there, correct?
That's right.
And then you have the corrected disbursement where y'all had to make right to the clients.
That's correct.
All right. Moving on to the next one. We have Mr., and I'm gonna use their first names. Use that for me if you can, please.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Christopher.
Mhm.
All right, and we have you have this disbursement right here, is that correct?
That's right.
And whose signature is that right there?
Alex Murdaugh's,
And we got how much?
750,000.
Going to what?
Fake forge,
The fake forge, is that correct?
that's right,
And then we have the check,
that we do.
and who's, do you recognize that on the back?
That is Alex Murdaugh's,
Okay, and this is $750,000?
that's correct.
All right, and then we have another disbursement sheet where y'all had to correct it and make it right to the client?
That's correct.
Y'all had to pay back $750,000
We did,
that Alex spent?
We
Client
did.
money?
we did, he stole it.
All right, let's go to the next one. Dion Martin, we have 3 for Mr. Martin, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, let's look at that. We have,
So you have a
Here-
little new category here. You see it above where it says structured annuity directly to Michael Gunn for 500,000, and then it's offset by the proceeds structured annuity below. This would represent like there was an annuity associated with that case that had been properly structured and sent, and that resulted in there being a $200,000 fee taken on that $500,000 that should not have been taken from the client.
so just a sleight of hand with paperwork, and Ella created a phantom a real $200,000 in fees from thin air.
That's right.
All right, but that's not the end of this one, is it?
No.
Okay. All right, right here on the second page, we have a disbursement to Forge, is that correct?
That's right.
And is that real Forge or fake Forge?
That's the fake forge.
How much is that one?
$338,000, 56.14.
Okay. Now, we already talked about on this list, we talked about the fake fee of 200,000 that you just mentioned.
That's right.
And we did the 338,056.
That's right.
14. Okay, let's keep going. And what's that?
That's the check for the $338,000 that's payable to the fake forge and endorsed by Alec.
All right. And then what is this disbursement sheet?
This one is showing a structured payment of $45,000, and this one incidentally had a quote attached to it and is signed by the client. And that also went to the fake forge account and his personal account. This is a copy of the quote from Forge.
All right. But no Forge structure was ever
No,
materialized.
no was done. We verified none was ever done.
All right. And what is that $45,000 check there?
This is the $45,000 check to the fake forge deposited by Alec.
And is this the disbursement sheet where y'all had to correct it and make it right to the client?
Yes.
All right. Moving on to the next one. We have Elise Mallory, and that's the one I showed you at the beginning. It is an example. Is that
That's
correct?
right.
All right. So we've done that one, and that was 183,528, where he took every last dime of it. Is
That's
that correct?
right.
Yep. All right, the last one I talked about was 321. The one before that was 320, and the one before that was 319. We are now on 322. Let me turn the page. And we have Mr. Jamian, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, and right here, we've got a disbursement sheet, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, and we have a forge of $90,000.
That's correct.
All right, and is that real forge or fake forge?
Fake forge.
Okay, and what is this right here, sideways?
That is the check payable to forge, the fake forge, and the endorsement on the back of the check.
All right. All right, and then we have an expense disbursement right there of 5541.17, is that correct?
That's correct.
And is that another amount that y'all had identified?
We identified later that that was an incorrect charge to a client file, so we reimbursed that as well.
Okay, and is this that page right here?
Yes.
And what did Alex bill to the client that y'all determined was improper?
Some airfare
To where?
on a private flight. I can't recall, but I believe that one might have been down to the Keys.
Did y'all have to pay that money back too in this corrected disbursement?
We did.
That was Exhibit 322. We got 333, Mr. Johnny, $95,000, is that right?
That's correct.
All right, on the first page, we have the disbursement sheet, and we have a forge line right here for $95,000.
That's correct.
Did that go to the real forge or the fake forge?
Fake forge.
Okay, we have a copy of the check right there, is that correct?
That's a copy of the check and the endorsement, and a copy of the correcting disbursement.
Y'all had to make that right to the client.
We did.
Moving on to 324, Mr. Jordan, we got a disbursement to forge, is that right?
That's right, for $85,000, along with the fake check and the endorsement on the check.
Okay. And then the corrected disbursement, correct?
You missed the one for $65,000. There was two in that one.
Yep, there it is right there.
That's right, and then the correcting.
All right. So we had an 85 and a 65,000 for that one, correct?
Correct.
Exhibit 325, this is now Mr. Manuel, and we have a $70,000 forge, is that correct?
That's correct.
Fake forge?
Fake forge.
All right. And what's that right there?
The check payable to forge, the fake forge, and the endorsement. And this is the correcting disbursement where we paid the client back that $70,000.
Go on to the next one. We got Miss Mary, and we got a settlement proceeds to forge of $19,500 right there. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And this is Exhibit 326. And did that go to real forge or fake forge?
The fake forge.
All right. And what is that right there?
Copies of the check, the fake forge, and the endorsement on the back by Alex.
All right. And then the corrected disbursement having to pay the money back
Correct.
by the firm. All right. Going on to Mr. Randy. Right here, we've got a disbursement of $9,569.30 on Exhibit 327.
Correct.
All right, next page we have what?
The copy of the check payable to the fake forge and the endorsement by Alec on the back of it.
All right, and then the correction disbursement.
Correct.
All right, and last one for this set is Exhibit 328, and we have Morris Mack. Thomas Moore, is that correct?
That's correct.
And whose signature is that right there?
That is Alex.
And the amount to forge of $125,000, is that
Yes.
right?
Incidentally, that's a forged signature for the client. The client confirmed that when we met with them.
Do you recognize that handwriting
It appears to me to be Alex printing.
on the disbursement sheet?
Yes, sir.
All right, and then we have the fake check right there,
That's correct.
or the fake forward check, and then that's all on that one for right now, is that correct?
Well, it's partial correction. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Were things like this going on in a lot of cases that Alec had? Fair amount?
Well, we found them in these several cases, and in the scope of all cases, not so much. I mean, we have a ton of volume, So this doesn't represent a large proportion of those, but this was common with them.
And that's my point, is
Yes.
that there's a large volume, and
Yes.
these are sprinkled throughout over years and years and years.
Sprinkled out over a decade or better.
Whenever there was an opportunity, it happened.
Yes.
All right. I'm gonna show you, let me get a couple more documents, Mark.
I'll stand for a moment.
I'm gonna show you what's been marked as Exhibit 329 here to this proceeding, and see if you recognize that.
I do. This is a spreadsheet of the payments that were made to Palmetto State Bank and misappropriated through that method.
All right, you testified earlier that the fake forge account, the Richard Alexander Murdaugh DBA forge, started around 2015. Is that right?
That's correct.
But you just uncovered a different mechanism whereby Alex Murdaugh misappropriated money from clients prior to that. Is that correct?
That's correct. Most of these took place in 2011 and 2012.
Okay. And did Alec have some particularly big cases in those years?
He did.
And what were those cases?
So he had Arthur Badger, which was against a UPS truck in Allendale where his wife was killed, and I believe a couple children hurt. There were several beneficiaries in that case. In that same wreck, well, then he had another one with Hakeem Pickney, who in that same wreck had a cousin in the car named Natasha Thomas.
Okay. Let's talk about the Badger case. What was the total settlement in that particular case?
In the Badger case, the total that was apportioned to Arthur Badger was $3.1 million. There was also a companion case, Donna Badger, with a good bit apportioned to it as well. I can't recall the number right here, right off the top of my head.
All right. But just for Arthur Badger, who was just one of the clients that Alec had, correct?
Right.
Just for Arthur Badger, what was the attorney fee that he received in that settlement?
He received $1,240,000.
The firm did.
The firm
But
did.
that would be ultimately on his books at the end of the year.
It would be credited to him.
$1,260,000, is that right?
$1,240,000.
Is that all the money that Alec received from that particular case once y'all did your review?
That is not.
What else did Alec take?
$1,325,000.
another $1.325 million, is that right?
That's right.
And how did he go about doing that?
Checks were payable to Palmetto State Bank that were then converted into personal items, payments for bank loans, payments for loans from a conservator account, payments to Johnny Parker, I believe it was, one to his father for paying back personal loans that they had given him.
Okay. And so we've got now what's been marked as Exhibit 329 up on the screen. I'll let the sirens go by. Guess I'll just talk over them. All right, we've got on this one at the top, we have Mr. Arthur Badger, is that right?
That's right.
And we have the date, and we have the amount, which is how much?
$1,360,000, and that is because we returned the PR fee in that case as well because the PR failed to do their job properly.
Okay. And I'm going to show you what's been marked for this hearing is 330. And is this the disbursement sheet?
Yes, sir.
And down here, we have Palmetto State Bank payment to fund structure per client request. Is that right?
That's right.
And that's the 1.325 million.
That's correct.
And did that go to the client?
No.
I see there's an email right here. Who is that from and to, and what's the date on that? You need me to bring it to you?
So this email is from Russell to Alec. Doesn't look right. There was an email that came from Alec to Russell asking if we could recut the checks in a certain way. Then Russell independently sent an email to Alec, which was forwarded to me and my accounting staff, asking if we could recut the $1.3 million check into 4 different checks.
And did y'all do that?
We did.
Have any reason at all to mistrust what was going on at that time?
No.
All right. So ultimately,
And ultimately, those got broken down into all these payments. This is the payments of how these checks were written and what benefit they went to.
and they were made out to what entity?
Palmetto State Bank.
And then after they were made out to Palmetto State Bank, what happened to them?
They got converted to personal usage for Alex Murdaugh's benefit.
Real quick, I see the spreadsheet says July 2005. I'm going to point you to this disbursement, though. What's the date on that disbursement?
November 2012.
So is that an error that needs to be corrected?
I'm sure that that's an error that needs to be corrected.
I'm going to bring your spreadsheet. Let's do that real quick. Give me a pen and November 11th, 2012. All right, let's talk about another case. I'm looking now at Exhibit 332, and we go back to your spreadsheet, and we have Natasha Thomas. Do you recognize that?
I do.
All right, and what was the amount on that particular one?
There were two payments. One was for $325,000 even. The other one was $25,245.08.
All right, and looking at Exhibit 332, we have down here at the bottom, we have payment, and it says what entity right there?
Palmetto State Bank?
For $325.
Yes.
So was a check cut from the trust account for $325?
Yes,
And is that it right there?
that is it.
And did that money go to the client?
No, that money went for Alex benefit.
All right. Did y'all have to pay that back and make that right for his
We
misappropriation?
did pay that back.
All right.
What you're seeing now is just all the different payments that were made from that money.
Those were converted at the bank into personal use for Alec.
That's correct.
All right, we're looking at the second check for, how much is that?
$25,245.08.
All right, and that's made out to what entity?
Palmetto State Bank,
From the client trust account?
correct?
Did that go to the client or did that go somewhere else?
That went to Alex's personal use again.
All right. And did y'all ultimately have to make that right?
We did.
Last one is Mr. Hakeem, correct?
That's correct.
Is that in a companion case to Ms. Thomas?
It is.
Got two misappropriations, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Looking at this disbursement sheet, we have right here on the disbursement sheet, what entity is that?
Palmetto State Bank,
For how much?
$309,581.46.
All right, and that's signed by who on this?
Russell Lafitte as conservator.
And is that the check right there?
That is the check.
Made out to what entity?
Palmetto State Bank,
In what year?
December 2011.
Okay, and did that money go to the client?
It did not.
Did you ultimately have to pay that back?
We did.
And then finally, $60,000 for
The
opinions.
PR fee again. We decided to pay the PR fee back.
And that's the PR fee right there for Mr. Lafitte, is that correct?
That's right.
The one who signed that disbursement sheet.
That's correct.
You mentioned Russell Lafitte. Do you have a relation to Russell Lafitte?
Russell Lafitte is my brother-in-law. He's married to my husband's sister.
June 7th, 2021, you came in demanding answers about those Ferris fees, correct?
That's correct.
And that conversation ended because he got a call about his father, correct?
That's correct.
And the inquiry got pushed to the side because of the tragedy of the murder of Maggie and Paul, is that correct?
That's correct.
And additionally, Alec called you about having to get finances together for a hearing in the boat case later that week, is that correct?
That's correct.
And that hearing got canceled as a result of the tragedy of the murder of Maggie and Paul.
That's correct.
And ultimately, in July, y'all received an email from Chris Wilson saying the money was in the account, is that correct?
That's correct.
What did you later find out about whether or not all that money was in the account?
We found out after September 3rd that all that money was not in the account. Chris Wilson called us and actually wanted us to pony up the other portion of the money.
And what portion was that?
There's a couple $100,000 that was still missing.
And once, a few months later, your attention got turned back to these matters, and you ran that inquiry, then the whole thing started to unravel, is that correct?
That's correct.
Not further this time, Your Honor.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor.
You have an idea about how long you plan to be? So we'll take a break now for about 10 minutes.
seated.
Mr. Griffin?
Good morning, Ms. Seckinger.
Good morning.
I want to first just go to June. I want to go to June the 7th when you were up in Alex Murdaugh's office and you were talking to him about the Ferris attorney fee money, correct?
Correct.
And while you were in the midst of this conversation, he received a telephone call informing him that his father was being readmitted back to the hospital, correct?
That was my understanding, yes.
And his father had just gotten out of the hospital either that Saturday or Sunday, right?
I don't know.
Okay, and do you know that he spent the Friday night in the hospital with his dad?
I don't know.
Do you, well, his father was Randolph Murdaugh, who was one of the principals of that law firm, correct?
I know who his father was, yes.
Was he a principal of the law firm?
He was previously. He wasn't at the time of his death.
Was he beloved by the partners in the law firm?
Yes.
And his father, and when Alec got the phone call that his father was going back into the hospital, and you mentioned that, you know, the belief was that it was terminal. I mean,
Correct.
You stopped your work and turned into a friend, right?
That's correct.
Provided him sympathy, correct?
That's correct.
And backed off of what you were doing to allow him to whatever he was going to do with his father, right?
That's right.
And so when you walked out of the office, things had come to a standstill as to your investigation through Alec directly as to where's the Ferris fee money, right?
That's right.
And Mr. Randolph Murdaugh passed away. Monday was the 7th. He passed away on the 10th, I believe, didn't he?
I'm not sure of the date, but that sounds right.
That Thursday, right? And if Alec had stayed out of the office from that Monday when he got a phone call that his dad was going back in the hospital in terminal until his dad passed and shortly after he passed, I mean, no one would have said a thing in that firm, would they?
I'm not sure if they would have not.
Now, what you were looking at, investigating, was where is the fee due to the law firm on the Ferris case, right?
That's right.
And that was a case where Alec was associated with Chris Wilson, and they represented plaintiff, I assume, Mr. Ferris, or Ms. Ferris, or the state of Ferris, or
Correct.
and they got a excellent result during the case. It was a verdict, a non-jury verdict after a trial in Richland County. You remember that?
I don't know the details of the case.
And that and you were the firm got a expense check but no fee check, and the immediate question went out to Chris Wilson's paralegal, where's the fee for the law firm, correct?
That's right.
And the paralegal said, our bosses got paid, and then that caused you to look into the matter.
That's right.
Okay. Now, and Alec told you, no, the money is still in Chris Wilson's trust account, right?
That's right.
And he said that to you on multiple occasions.
That's right.
And in fact, Chris Wilson sent an email saying the money's in my trust account
He did in July.
in July that was forwarded on to you, right?
That's right.
And I noticed, well, let me back up. Did Alec explain, did he come up with a story to explain, well, the reason the money is in the trust account is because I'm considering whether to structure the fee?
We did discuss that, yes.
And in that law firm, your law firm that you're an employee of, partners have structured attorney's fees in the past, correct?
They have?
And so the fact that, and just so the record is clear, when we're talking about structuring attorney's fees, it is delaying the payment of the fees through some financial product. Isn't that correct?
That's right.
And by delaying the payment of the fees through a financial product, if successful, it allows to delay the payment of taxes on that money.
That's correct.
Now, in the times that the fees have been structured in the past, when the payment of the fees have been delayed, who is the beneficiary of the financial product? Is it the partner that brought the fee to the firm, or is it the law firm?
So we've only done it once or twice in the past, and when it was done, it was the beneficiary was the partner, but it was also contributed and figured into our allocation at the fee breakdown at the end of the year.
Okay. So there's no, I mean, the fact that there's a structure the time you did it, when it was disclosed above board, it is, and just use, say, $100,000 fee, for example. I mean, to allocate it to the firm, that partner who delayed receiving $100,000 till sometime in the future would still have to put his 7.5% or her 7.5% into the kitty of the firm?
Right, and that would also be a percentage of the money that he received, that'd be taken into account of that.
Well, would it? I mean, if it was $100,000?
It did.
So he got credit on, or she got credit for the $100,000, even though it never went to the firm?
Yes.
Okay. So if a partner,
If a partner did it correctly, it would be recognized and it would be accounted for correctly. The question wasn't whether he was going to structure a fee, it was whether he had received the fee personally.
understand, and he had said he had it and it was at Chris Wilson's office.
That's what he stated.
Now, the spreadsheet and the files that you were asked about, I noticed the Ferris matter wasn't on any of them, correct?
That's right.
And the Ferris matter wasn't on any of them because the Ferris matter, the firm ultimately got paid $792,000, which was what the firm was owed on the Ferris case.
We did.
And after Maggie and Paul's murder, and after Mr. Randolph's death, murder on the 7th, Mr. Randolph Murdaugh's death on the 10th, how long of a delay was there before you got in touch with Lee Cope and Lee reached out to Chris Wilson?
There wasn't a delay in me getting in touch with Lee Cope. Lee Cope knew about it. The decision was made to call me off of it. Now Lee would deal with it from there with Chris Wilson.
Okay, so as far as you know, there was no delay. It was just taken over by Lee Cope.
There wasn't a delay on my part. It was taken over by Lee Cope.
And you don't know whether Lee, how long it took Lee Cope to reach out to
You would
Chris?
have to ask Lee.
And so, and you can't testify to that. You would have to ask Lee, right?
Yeah, I don't know.
And then you had talked about a Hirschberger case where there was actually what appeared on paper to be a structured fee, correct?
That's right.
And you're, having done one in the past, it did not appear that that the proper procedure were followed so that Alec would have to pay income tax on it,
That's
whether
correct.
it's structured or not.
That's correct.
And his explanation, I think you said that was back in,
Late May, early June.
yeah, that check is May 12th, 2021, the Hirschberger.
I can't be sure when the exact conversations were. They were all going on around the same time, but it had been after that check.
Okay. And that, and so the thought there was, and Alec told you that, well, I'm just trying to sort of shelter money from me, put in Maggie's name because I'm being a defendant in the voting case.
That's correct.
Now you and your firm, and you've had outside forensic accountants looking at everything, and you don't have any information or evidence or documents that would suggest that any of the Hirschberger fee went into Maggie's name.
I did not pursue that portion of it. We have testimony from Michael Gunn that there was no annuity set up.
Right. And I guess, right, so as far as you can tell Judge Newman here today is that Alec put that money in a fake Forge account that was Alex Murdaugh doing business as Forge.
Correct.
And you don't have any information that that money then went into Maggie Murdaugh's investment account, personal account, or any sort of account, right?
I know that it went into his Forge account. After that, I don't know how it was used.
And I think you said that that you didn't start back up and looking into the Hirschberger matter until sometime in, I think you said, it did not readdress it until late September.
That's correct.
Okay. And early September, you were sitting in your office and you had a epiphany, or just a thought. Well, let's just see how many times his cases have checks going to Forge.
Well, when you're speaking of epiphany, I had started digging through his client list for every fee that he had brought in. And rather than going one by one, my epiphany was, let me just run a payment ledger on Forge and see what that turns up, rather than digging one by one.
Okay. And what prompted you to do that?
Because I was trying to look to see if there had been any more settlements that had been written to Forge like this other one with Hirschberger, so that we could account for them and discuss how we were going to handle them at the year end with the bonus distribution.
I see. And at what time of the year do you have to prepare final reports for the
December.
partners? For December? And when do you start working on that?
It depends every year, but usually December.
But in September, you were, I guess, doing your job, trying to see if there were other Hirschberger type structures out there.
That's right.
Okay. And so you ran a report of financial records that were maintained at the law firm, correct?
Correct.
These were electronic records?
Yes.
And you didn't have to order bank statements from anyone, you had them right there on your computer system?
I have mine, yes.
And there's nothing that happened well, let me back up. We've seen checks to Forge, I think you said, going back to 2015.
Correct.
Have those checks been on the firm financial system and maintained them since 2015?
They were. They didn't catch our attention before that.
Okay. And there's nothing about the murder of Maggie and Paul that prevented you from accessing that information at any point in time, is there?
No, what prevented me was work and personal obligations to get to that point in time to have the opportunity to look.
And but the information had been at your fingertips. Anything that was done in 2015, it was there. 16, it was there. 17, it was there.
That's
18.
right.
And that's why you were able to go back and do the work, and law firm stood up and made these clients whole. Is that right?
That's right.
Now, do you have the summary exhibit 314 up there?
I do not.
I may have it on here. Well, I guess I can put on Mr. Elmo here. It's not my favorite animal, but well, let me just have you look at this right quick. Can you go through Exhibit 314 and there, the grand total is $2,841,512.55, and tell us, just identify anyone on this list that is just straight diversion of fees that were due to the law firm.
Both Hirschbergers were straight diversions of fees that were due.
Is there any other one on here?
Partials of some of the other ones, I can't remember the breakdowns, but I know like Elise Mallory or one of those two, some of them should have been firms' fees due to them.
Right. But all the other ones, but the Hirschberger matter, involve proceeds that should have gone to the client, right?
Which your client stalled, yes.
Right. And that, well, you investigated it and you came to that conclusion and the law firm came to that conclusion, right?
Yes.
Okay. But as part of the investigation, did you have to interview the clients and ask the client, hey, did you authorize Alex to put this in a fake forge account?
We did interview the clients, most of them, we met with them. Most of them were very surprised and shocked and stated that they had no idea
Right.
that they had been stolen from.
And so to establish that the clients didn't authorize Alec to do what he did, I mean, you had to go to the clients
Correct?
and get their response.
Correct?
And you accepted their response, rightfully so, correct?
Correct?
On this list of 314, is there anyone where you didn't go to the client or the client representative, except perhaps Hirschberger, and say, did you authorize Alec to do this?
I might not have met personally with all of them, but somebody within our firm did.
Right, okay. Now, Barrett, the second one, Barrett Boulware, said took insurance proceeds, and that's Exhibit 314. And I think you said Alec had power of attorney,
They did.
and was Mr. Boulware alive in 2018?
I don't remember.
And how is it that you know that Alec did not have permission from Barrett Boulware to keep that money personally, that perhaps Mr. Boulware had owed him some money?
When I believe Ronnie Crosby's the one who spoke with Jarrett Boulware, who is his PR, so that'd be a better suited question for Ronnie than it would be for me.
So we would need Ronnie Crosby and Jarrett Boulware to come in and testify as to what Barrett Boulware may or may not have agreed to do with Alec.
You may have one that he could come in and testify that to, but the rest of these on these lists, people have told me that they either did not know about it, was covered up, or was forged.
And they would need to come in and tell the
They
court.
would, and they have.
Oh, they've testified?
They believe they have,
Not in this proceeding.
not in this proceeding.
Now, there was another group of cases that involved Palmetto State Bank, is that correct?
That's right,
And your brother-in-law?
that's right.
And again, there's Arthur Badger, Natasha Thomas, Hakeem Pinckney. Do you know if Mr. Lafitte or anyone at the bank was personal representative or conservator for any of these folks?
He was conservator for Natasha Thomas. I believe he was conservator for Hakeem Pinckney. I can't remember the exact circumstance. And he was the conservator for Arthur Badger's wife.
Okay. And Mr. Lafitte, I mean, all of these checks went to Palmetto State Bank, correct?
Correct.
And then from Palmetto State Bank, they were sent out to pay, according to your investigation, expenses that Alec owed. Is that right?
Correct.
And repayment of loans that Alec owed, right?
Correct.
And that Mr. Lafitte was knowledgeable about that, as far as you know, right?
Appeared to be.
Now, I want to go into a little bit more detail on some of these. Let's just go to, I'm going to put it up on this Elmo, and it is the Ben Allen Kendall. Well, that's Hirschberger, but let's don't do that. Let's do the next one, Adriana. And let's see if I can do this right. Do you see that one? That's the disbursement sheet.
Yes.
And the recovery amount here is, and it says settlement proceeds to Forge Consulting, and that's $225,000.
Correct.
And that, according to this document, represents what the client should have gotten and didn't get.
Correct.
And then the attorney's fees here said $22,000. Is that the firm got $22,000?
Yes.
Okay. And then this same exhibit, there's a lengthy footnote down here. I guess, does this footnote explain what happened?
Yes, it does.
In this footnote, it says there were 3 previous disbursements in this matter. Is that right?
Yes.
And it says the first one occurred on December 13th, 2018, issuing attorney's fees and cost, $19,932.89 to Palmetto State Bank, satisfying loans and et cetera, and other matters. Is that right?
That's correct.
Now, do we know if any of those are fake bills?
They look to be legitimate.
Did you confirm they were legitimate?
Yes,
And how'd you do that?
by looking at the paperwork and observing the paperwork.
Okay. And then here, there was another disbursement on December 20th, 2018, is that right?
That's right.
And this document referenced some exhibits. There's an exhibit A through F. I don't believe that's attached. I mean, it may be. I don't have it. Did you prepare this footnote?
I don't remember which ones exactly I prepared. I've prepared a lot of them, and Chelsea Van prepared a lot of them as well.
So, and most all these have an explanation and a footnote as to what the entire transaction was
That's
about.
right.
Okay. And you didn't do every single one. It was a team effort, I take it.
That's right.
And so, people on the team investigated it and then would have to come in here and explain exactly what they did and what they learned. And
That's correct. It's
And this-
also been through forensic audit and also looked at former FBI, and it's been provided to law enforcement who all looked over it as well.
okay. All right. Now, I think you also said that back to June the 7th, that you said that Alec called you and asked for his updated balance in his 401k,
That's right.
and he told you he was putting together some financial records for civil discovery in the voting case, and there was a hearing coming up,
Yes.
and that he had asked you, he'd questioned you previously about the balance in the 401k.
That's right. It's not been the first time.
And the times that he questioned you, was it in the context of putting together information for the voting case, or just he was curious?
Putting together information for financials.
Okay. Financials in general, or financials in the voting case, or you just don't know?
I didn't really ask particulars.
Nope.
The
So,
perception was that it's for the voting case. Talk in the office, we knew hearings were coming up, we knew they were looking for his financials.
okay. Well, when you said on the 7th he called you about financials, did he reference the voting case during
I
that?
believe he did.
Okay. Now, do you know what impact or what consequences Alec would have suffered from his partners if he had or if you had found that he had diverted the Ferris fee to himself personally, as opposed to putting it in a structure or putting it in the firm? Do you know?
I think that he probably would have had some bad repercussions for him, because they were adamant that we were not going to be part of having any portion of hiding or diverting any fees.
And the concern was hiding fees from the civil discovery in the voting case.
Yes, at that point in time it was.
And that wasn't, And at that point in time, no one was saying that they thought he was stealing from the firm, but that he was sheltering money from being disclosed.
That was the opinion, yes.
And then it wasn't until September when you ran a report and you saw all these forged checks being deposited in the Bank of America account and endorsed by Alec. You'd seen his signature, that you realize there's been something far different going on than what anyone believed. Is that right?
That's correct.
And that's what led to his resignation or termination.
Correct.
Okay. And that information had been in the books and records of the law firm since 2015.
Correct.
One last question. That the information that in part of the investigation where you and members of your staff and the forensic accountants determined that the clients did not authorize any of these transactions? I mean, you have no personal knowledge other than what's been told to you by people working for you or by the clients, right?
I also saw some of the deposits going into his personal Bank of America account statements.
No, I understand that, but whether the clients,
If they had some back deal, I don't know about any of it, no.
right. Any information you have about what the clients told the firm is hearsay, as far as you know.
It's not hearsay if they said it to me.
Okay. And some said it to you.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Very briefly, Your Honor. One thing you know is that the money that you've talked about for the fake forge went into an account Richard Alexander Murdaugh DBA Forge, correct?
Correct.
Is there any possible legitimate explanation for client trust funds to go into that account?
No.
And after you realized that they went into those accounts, did the firm ultimately refund the money to those clients?
Yes.
You mentioned that you actually found in his office some bank statements for that particular account. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 335. Have you take a look at it? Is that consistent with the Richard Alexander Murdaugh DBA fake forge account that you saw?
Yes.
That you had repeated instances of client trust money going into?
Yes.
That there's no possible legitimate explanation for?
That's correct.
You were asked some questions about the manner of your inquiry and that sort of thing. And I want to take you back a little bit further very quickly. Do you remember, is it common for, after the books get cleared at the end of the year, for certain partners to loan money to the firm to handle operating expenses until fees start to come in?
It is. Basically, we wipe out all the cash reserves, so in order to operate for the first couple of months, attorneys will loan money to the firm for operating expenses.
At some point in time prior to all of this, did you become aware of an instance in which Alex Murdaugh had erroneously received a repayment that was actually meant for his brother, Randy?
We did.
All right. And did that happen once, or did the same thing happen twice?
It actually went through twice. The check was written to him erroneously, and within a few days, he brought the check back to my staff and had it recut to him. So the first check that was recut was held for him for about a year. So the replacement check went through immediately, and the first check cleared about a year later, and that's when we discovered that going back and looking, that I discovered that he was paid erroneously, that it should have been Randolph Murdaugh and not R. Alexander Murdaugh.
So it was one repayment, but he managed to get it twice.
That's right.
How much was that check roughly, do you recall?
$125,000 roughly.
$125,000. Was he confronted about this when that was discovered?
Yes.
What was his explanation?
His explanation was that it was an accident, that he thought it was due to him and that he didn't know, and that he found the other one later and deposited it too because he thought they were due to him.
Okay. And was he required to pay that money back?
Yes.
And after he gave that explanation of, oops, I didn't realize these $225,000 checks were for me, was that matter then forgotten or moved on from?
It was shelved, yes.
It was shelved. Nothing, no repercussions happened at that point in time or anything like
No.
that? Okay. So the money gets paid back and people moved on, is that right?
That's right.
Okay. You testified before that when the murders happened, that the inquiry, nobody was going to bring that up now in the wake of the murders, the Ferris fees that you had talked to Alec about the morning that Maggie and Paul were killed, correct?
That's right. It's a family-like place. Everybody was concerned for him, his family. We knew we had time to discuss this before the end of the year, and at that point, like we said, we didn't think he was stealing any money from us.
They had no reason at that time to think he was stealing, correct?
That's right.
And so it did get shelved, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And then in July, you got an email, is that correct?
That's right.
And you testified to this before. What did the email say from Chris Wilson's office?
It said that the money was in the account and available to us at any time that we would ask.
And then, so at that point, the money seemed like it was there. The money is not missing, and so the matter was shelved. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. However, you've testified that things have been going on for a while, and it was months later that triggered you to do that inquiry. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay? Because there have been multiple instances over the years. Is that right?
That's right.
But that has nothing to do, the fact that that might have occurred regardless of, at any point in time because of all the things that have been going on. That has nothing to do with the fact that when things were happening in June, they got shelved, and then you found out the money was there, and you thought that matter was closed. Is that correct?
That's right. We never knew about the prior. We had no reason to look. We had no complaints from clients. We had nobody saying they were missing money. And this just turned up when we started searching because of the Hirschberger and the other relevant things.
Has there been instances in which Alec used the firm credit card for personal expenses and was required to pay that back?
Yes,
And if the money got paid back, well, then the matter, everybody moved on. Is that right?
that's right.
So there was a history of that.
That's right.
You get the money back in, and everybody moves on. Is that
That's
correct?
right. It's a history of trust and brotherhood.
And that's what happened in July with the Ferris fees. Is that correct?
That's right.
You were asked about whether or not you were told in July that the money was in Chris Wilson's trust account. That's what you were told. Is that correct?
Correct.
Have you come to find out, however, that it actually had not been there?
We did.
And you found this check proving it, correct?
That's correct.
The bottom line is that there had been a long history of if the money got paid back, people would move on, correct?
That's right.
Things were continuing to percolate. They got delayed in June because of everything that happened, correct?
Correct.
But you were now curious, and eventually, months later, you look back at that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that also was highlighted and sparked by the discovery of the check, proving that he had not been telling the truth the entire time.
Correct.
Thank you. Nothing further.